Hi, welcome back to The Active Listener, where we aim to listen, not just hear. And today we're talking about intercultural awareness and communication. I'm very pleased to have a colleague of mine. We've worked together and taught on things before. Welcome, Yasmin.
Hi, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you on board. And of course, we've done some stuff about conscious inclusion and unconscious bias. But today we're going to be talking a bit about cultural awareness, which I know is your kind of field of expertise. So tell us a little bit about what it is, who you are. Over to you.
Okay, so intercultural awareness and communication it's starting about being aware of who we are, our own identities, what is our background, what layers are we made up of before we even think about exploring and discussing other sort of identities and cultures. That's the awareness part, and the awareness is the start of it. And then you go on to sort of communication, like how do different cultures communicate. When I'm talking about culture at the moment, I'm talking about nationality, but of course we're not just our nationality. As I said, we're made up of many different layers, whether our beliefs, our values, sexual orientation, gender, etc. But for intercultural and working across cultures, it really is important to be very aware of how other cultures communicate. And that can cover so many things, from giving feedback, to perceiving time differently, etc. And of course, we have a national culture, but also within that culture we have a team culture, we have um, the departmental culture, the organizational culture. So there is a lot of culture going on that obviously, in order to be effective and inclusive, we need to improve our awareness and communication skills.
Well, it's a huge subject, and I know, when we've been working on conscious inclusion, we've kind of touched on this, but this is really your area's expertise. So, I always find it helpful to have you on board, and enjoy working alongside you. And
Same.
it's one thing I can see you're obviously really passionate about it, and I'd be interested to know where that comes from. How did you start? Where did that awareness begin?
Yeah, from a young age, I suppose. So from the age of 6, I started traveling with my parents. We went to Germany because we hosted international students in our home for 7 years. And we had quite a few German students, and we were invited to go and stay with them in Germany. So I remember that was my first experience abroad. And then by the age of 7, I'd been to Kenya. And sometimes you see people say, I don't know, on social media, like, where's the first place you went to? And I was thinking, or plane actually, because I think Germany, we drove there, and it was Kenya. And it's like, wow, why did I go to Kenya? Well, my father is a Kenyan Indian. He was born and brought up in Kenya. So that's why. So I've kind of been surrounded by many different cultures from a very young age. Um, and then my passion was studying languages. So I studied French and German at school, and then went on to study Spanish and Italian. I was then very envious when I heard people saying, "Oh, when I lived in so and so." So I did the certificate of English language teaching to adults, and I went to I started teaching in London first, and then I went to Lima, Peru, and then to Madrid, Spain, teaching business English. So, it's fascinating. I feel I can put myself into other people's shoes, having to communicate in a second language and the highs and lows of living and working in other countries. And I just feel like that, I want to help people just become more effective and inclusive in, communicating with other cultures, so that fosters the sort of diversity and inclusion and belonging, which is, very important. Very important skill to have, and obviously an environment that is creates a lot of innovation and engagement. um yeah, so that's me really. And then I did a 2-day course in London, intercultural competence at the London School of International Communication, and this is where I first kind of discovered, sort of put all of my experience and my knowledge and attitude, this is me. This is what I need to be doing. This is what I need to be doing in the world. Is promoting that awareness and communication effectively across cultures. I then went on to do a postgraduate certificate in intercultural communication. So that was a lot more academic, but also business as well. So I've kind of come full circle. And now I am delivering training and workshops and one-to-one coaching for anyone who wants to improve, their awareness and communication skills, whether that's personally, maybe they've got friends and family they'd like to, to be sort of better communicating with, or in a global team. And also I have a lot of customer service experience in delivering training, customer service. So I've got a lot of experience dealing with global customer service teams.
I think one thing that strikes me is that you've really been able to pursue something you enjoy doing, and that's the fact it's all about people, and you've got that genuine interest, and that you want to help people understand one another, really, how they relate. So are there kind of things to specifically watch out for when working cross culturally, if we're talking about from perhaps an international perspective between different nationalities?
Yeah, so, well, first of all, it's good to have cultural intelligence. So what is cultural intelligence? So it's the capability of being able to relate and work effectively across cultures. So it has been said that it's where emotional intelligence left off, and then cultural intelligence starts. So, that's all the things like empathy, curiosity, open-minded. There's a lot more to it than that. Having the knowledge, skills, attitude and awareness to work effectively across cultures. There's also dimensions, cultural dimensions, and that they are models, but, you don't, they're not positive or negative. They're just used to measure things. So, for example, there's some about time, different cultures see time differently or perceive time differently. When we work together, for example, you've got relationship-based cultures versus task-based cultures. What does that mean? So, for example, countries such as the USA, the Netherlands, Germany, the UK, we're very much, in general, and of course this is an overview, and as always, we are individuals first, and then the culture aspects come into it. So, for example, if I give you a task to do and you do it very well, then I trust you. I don't really need to know you very well or like you. But that's a given. I don't need to, it's not a cultural thing to really have to build relationships, although I do think, with generations and obviously the last 3 years, things do change. Of course they do. Cultural is fluid. It is not static. And therefore, I think building relationships, especially when we're working online for like 3 years, obviously there's you need to build that when you're working virtually. But then you've got relationship-based cultures. For example, I've got a colleague in Mexico, and I've been there a couple of times for work, so I can relate to this, that it's much more relationship. So you have to build a relationship first. People want to know who you are, they want to know all about you. Build that relationship first, and then we get down to business. And that is really, really important, and there's lots of examples about that when you can look at case studies, etc.
That's really interesting. I think particularly what I find fascinating is that we're not talking about stereotypes, because obviously that's something we work on in our workshops. And as you said, individuals are individuals, but there clearly are common cultural traits within things. And it reminds me, you talking about working in Mexico, I've got friends from a few countries in South America, and saying, when they came to the UK, they had to really hold themselves back, so to speak, when meeting people, or going into meeting, or giving someone a hug, or giving them a kiss, which was absolutely culturally fine. Whereas certainly in some of the offices you and I may have been in, there would be a raised eyebrow if that would happen. So it's interesting how kind of trying to manage that. I think also, to be honest, just even from a point of view aside from the fact that within the UK we have lots of cultures present, if we look at like a north-south divide, and again, I'm not saying all northerners are one and all southerners are that, but clearly from people I know who have sort of moved down to the south have noticed the difference in terms of like language you would use and colloquialisms and stuff. So yeah, really interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes it's like a different language. I remember when I was at university, I had a friend from Wales, one from Ireland, one from Yorkshire, etc. And then we'd go away to our respective cities for holidays. So I'm from Cambridge, and then say you hadn't seen them all summer, and then you go back, and then they started speaking. We were all speaking English, but in fact they were
Yeah.
speaking in their accent and with their colloquialisms and slang, and honestly I couldn't understand the words. We
Yeah.
couldn't understand each other because we'd been back to our respective cities. So yeah.
So from a sort of a global perspective, obviously you work internationally, and we hear the term sort of plain English. How does that work? How do you sort of remain independent of your of the colloquialism, of the slang? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, that isn't easy.
Mm,
I'm one of my skills, I believe, is can also be disadvantages is being very observant. And yeah, I observe it all the time. It's not easy. I feel because I have taught English as a second language, I've learnt to grade my language accordingly. And although someone may speak, really high level, fantastic English, they may not know every single thing in the English language, such as British sarcasm, such as
mm,
slang, colloquialisms, jargon, and sense of humour. Can definitely get lost in translation. I mean, it's great to have some humour in your training sessions, etc., or your presentation, but you do need to do that with care. So that's a real passion of mine to be very, because again, if you attend a workshop or something, you get more into this, but you have like direct and indirect communicators, and direct being explicit and indirect being implicit. However, regardless of sort of your cultural style, it is best to be explicit and direct
mm.
when communicating with across cultures, basically, so that everybody can understand. Because I've seen colleagues come out with phrasal verbs, idioms, things like that, and it's just gone sort of over over people's heads. And yeah, I'm just very passionate about that, because I think it's really important. People, a lot of people around the world learn English, and we need to either respect that as well by communicating in a way that they can understand.
Well, it's a fascinating subject, Yasmin, and I certainly enjoy delivering those unconscious bias and conscious inclusion workshops because you have an area of expertise there.
Thank you.
So if anyone wanted to get in touch, I'm going to put a link in the description, but I'm sure you'll be happy to have a conversation with someone.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Always up for a conversation. Any sort of, if you want a consultation, a free consultation to discuss anything further. Yes, so I'm called Joy of Communication. My mission is for communication to be a joy, and it's also my middle name. And I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.
Brilliant. Well, thanks again for your time, and we'll catch up again soon.
Thank you very much for having me. Thanks, Mark. Bye.